Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, back with another video.
This too much of man-woman thing is being done, unfortunately. It's a small biological difference to serve a certain purpose. When man's muscle did everything on this planet, naturally man was dominant. This dominance also is misunderstood. He dominated in one arena which was filmed and reported. She dominated in a different arena which was private and not reported. If you make economics the only value of your life, money is the only prime value in your life, then world will become very male, because there'll be no room for the feminine to find expression. There may be women, but they will surrender their feminine to be successful, unfortunately. This should not happen. Women should succeed as women, not as men.
Now, I'm speaking from what I regard as a transgender position. I don't think of myself as man or woman, okay? And my position sort of between the genders is the entire basis, I think, of my analysis. But it's a return by secularists, okay, to a notion of hellfire. Men have absolutely been demonized in a way that makes no sense, because when you go to the elite campuses in the United States, you see boys who've been so processed, who are desperate to please women. And the more men try to please women, the more men follow the agenda that women have set for themselves, the less women want them, okay? So women everywhere are unhappy. They're so unhappy. They're unhappy. They're unhappy. Why? Okay, because there are no men anywhere near. The men have been incinerated, okay, in the area around them. Okay, all right, no.
With full-blown feminine nature, they must be able to be successful in a society. They don't have to pretend to be a man to be successful. This has to go. If this has to go, the world has to move completely from brawn to brain. It's very important, this transition. Now, when you talk about economy or money power, it's brawn. It's a different kind of muscle. So we are taking away the physical muscle and bringing in the money muscle, so once again you're creating a male-dominated society, masculine-dominated society, because now women have understood how to be successful by being masculine. No, this is not a good thing for the world. There must be a world where women can be 100% feminine and still be absolutely successful. If this has to happen, money should not be the ruling factor, it should be just currency. Money is just currency to facilitate things. But right now, money is the ruling factor, so masculine becomes the dominant force. We need to change this. Unless music, aesthetics, love, beauty and other things, everything becomes equal proportions, feminine will not flourish. And if feminine is wiped out of this planet, then all the men will sit and wonder, why are we living?
This biological and cultural inheritance means that, yes, gender fluidity is accurate. There is such a thing as gender fluidity. The truth is that we have, in our biological inheritance, we have many mechanisms for adaptation. We have something called the rostral cingulate zone in our brain, which every time we get approval, from social approval, we respond by trying to do more of what gives us social approval. So that's both biological and it's also social. That's built into our system so that we could unite as groups of people to be able to fight off other people. Okay. We had to all be Catholics, and then we'd have a stronger Poland, and so that we could resist, the forces from the outside. If you start getting a lot of people saying, we respect women more than men, and trans kids will be the new type of honored child, we will have many more people move from male to female, and to be trans and be whatever the society tells them is honored at that point in history. I mean, if we can get people to be willing to die in order to be called hero, if social bribes are that important, so people will die to get approval, you can see how, if we're saying that the new approval will come from trans, or gender fluidity, we can see how kids will want to be part of the new approval system. Now, is it healthy or not healthy? It becomes unhealthy when we are unbecoming who we are naturally prone to be, because we're trying to get a new type of approval from a new group.
It sounds like we have some very serious decisions to make as a society.
Yes.
That's the implication of, I think, of what you're saying.
Today we're going to be talking about masculinity, femininity as it pertains to the INFJ, and a case for MGTOW, right? I'm going to approach it from an unbiased approach, right? An unbiased perspective. And this is not to sway anyone. It's not to rev anyone's engine, right? It's basically to provide context and to say, listen, here's the situation. Take the information, and then now you can now formulate your own ideas, right? But there's a lot of chaos, and I've actually have some notes, and I'm going to provide you a sort of unbiased perception, perspective in terms of where we are, where we came from, and possibly where we're going, right? So it's going to be painting the picture, okay? Now, let's talk about chaos. We're in a situation right now where, as it pertains to, let's say, men, okay? Let's just start with men. In terms of the current atmosphere, especially for those who are, let's say, INFJ. I myself, I'm an INFJ. I'm very introverted in terms of my feelings, my thoughts. I'm very reserved in terms of my social interaction. Don't like a lot of folks around me. I don't like entertaining. I love my alone time. I'm very I'm not aggressive, even though around family I can be a little bit more, just naturally. But normally when I'm around like other A-type aggressive folks, I usually take a back seat because I don't like to sort of carry the torch, be the one in charge. I really don't like that. I don't like a lot of noise, a lot of chaos. I really don't like that. But unfortunately, like, I feel that, see, when I present this information, it's from a wider lens, and I find that a lot of folks, especially within INFJ, within the INFJ community, they sort of provide the context, but within like a narrow lens. It's not to say that the information is incorrect, but it's like they don't provide like that depth, right? So I was watching a video by a fellow INFJ YouTuber, and I'm not gonna reveal her name just for the sake of the community's integrity. But she was discussing how female INFJs are more masculine than INFJ males. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that statement or what she said, because obviously a lot of INFJ males have been, messaging her and reporting that they feel a certain way because society is telling them that they need to sort of man up and be less toxic and be told man up, that they need to be more competitive, be strong, and that they need to be the providers and all that, and they need to have all these masculine traits, in order to win over women and so forth and so on. Which I agree, I totally agree. However, we're such in a chaotic state that we don't have someone, and I'm not tooting my horn, but we don't have someone right now within the INFJ community who can sit back and say, whoa, you're right, but You need to know the context. You need to know the why.
Let's talk about the educational system a bit. I have two nephews, who are, in very, very early in the education system now. And I've also been hearing from all sorts of folks that boys are being taught in school very commonly to be a lot less like these traditional male roles and so forth. And that's, part of the strategy or part of the approach. What is the impact of that?
The impact is shame. And the impact is boys saying, I'm really sorry I was born a boy.
Give rise to masculinity.
I think the lady just now just spoke very right to the point. The idea that we have balls as being a definition of whether you're brave or not means that men can have them taken away from them, but women can't. I think that's quite an interesting analysis of what bravery means. It's something that shames men, but you can't be shamed as a woman for being afraid. That would be one thing I'd say in response to that. The other question, or the more specific point that I was going to make, was I would like to hear the panel's response to the idea of what the narrative around toxic masculinity does to preventing policy and public concern for the issues that men have. If you locate the blame for men's problems on men and boys themselves as a consequence of their own pathology, how does that affect people's responses to try and doing something about them?
You need to know the context. You need to know the why. It's not just to give you that feedback sandwich of like, yes, you can be that. You can wear whatever you want. You can feel emotional. You can feel empathy. It's not enough for that. Like, we have to understand, because again, INFJ, we don't just stop there. We don't stop at the victim mentality, right? For us, it's not about us. You think it's about us, but it's not really about us. I'm going to repeat myself. Clip one, go.
It's just like a popularity contest. And so it brought out maybe the worst or the best in my personality, which was like, I'm going to take this on and I'm going to use myself as the battering ram. So I'm going to make it about me, knowing it's not about me, which is weird because people can't actually process that. And no matter how much you lay out to them and say, look, I get it. I know you think it's really about me. I know you think I'm that nuts. But if you actually look at what I've done, like if you didn't know me and you just saw what I've done, how would all that work and all these things be possible if I was who you think I am?
So I'm going to paint the picture and I'm going to provide the visual content, okay, from others. I'm going to do less speaking, but from others, so that you can get a better understanding. I'm talking about from others who are in the field, who have been doing the research, who have studied this, okay, from an unbiased approach.
There is something called as masculine and feminine. Unfortunately, we have created a world where our idea of success and well-being is overwhelmingly masculine. You must understand, I'm not talking about male and female, I'm talking about masculine and feminine. A man is capable of being as feminine as he wishes to be in terms of his thought, in terms of his emotion, when he wishes to be. Similarly, a woman is as capable as a man to be as masculine as she wishes when the situation demands or when such actions are needed. Right now we have created education systems which are purely masculine, which is producing women also. Whether you like it or not, unfortunately, the idea of success has become masculine. Those who want to be successful, even if they're women, they're becoming like this, which is a serious damage to humanity. If you take away the feminine from the world, everything that's gentle, everything that's beautiful, everything that's aesthetic, everything that is the subtler aspect of life will disappear, and only providing and survival aspect of life will exist. Right now, there is a serious concern about this. See, 25 years ago, in a normal conversation, nobody would think it's worthwhile discussing economy, isn't it? We talked about the weather, we talked about juicy things in the town. We never talked about the economy. Today in every conversation, everybody is talking about the economy. Economy means livelihood, economy means providing. This is purely masculine in nature. I'm not saying women cannot provide, I'm not meaning men and women, I'm talking about masculine and feminine. If you make the society so overwhelmingly masculine, you will obliterate the feminine. In this, everything that's gentle and beautiful will vanish, even in a woman. Because when you set the standards that this is the only way you can succeed, even she will adapt to the situation, which I feel they are adapting, and many women are expressing their masculinity much more stronger and cruder than a man.
The role of a public intellectual is to paint a painting, to paint for you, a canvas, a panorama of everything. He can say, he has full right to say, because he's human, well, some of them are human, and they have right to say, listen, these are the solutions, I mean, 1 to 19. Yeah. I personally think that 17 and 19 are the best. Why I think? Because they have a right to an opinion, but not before they have painted for you the total picture. In a totally unbiased and unprejudiced way. No one is doing this today.
No,
not a single one is doing this today. So yes.
And so the problem isn't mothers not working hard enough. Mothers work extremely hard, and they're some of the hardest working people in the world. But what the problem is that the more that they nurture and take care of their child, the more oftentimes they protect their child, and they're very sensitive to their every need. And that's very good for the protection part. But boys in particular, girls too, but boys in particular need more than just protection. They need encouragement to try things that are new. They need encouragement to take risks. They need encouragement to do things that are that are the result of boundary enforcement. So dads, for example, will typically roughhouse a lot more than moms will. And moms will look at the dads and they'll go, oh my God, I feel like I have just one more child to monitor here. And the dads are saying, okay, kids, jump off the couch and onto my back, and your job is to pin me down before I pin you down. Well, what dad doesn't understand and dad doesn't explain to moms, so moms can't hear what dads don't say, is that creates a bond. And most good dads use that bond to then enforce boundaries. Okay, yes, you pinned me down, but Jimmy, you stuck your elbow into your sister Sarah's eye. You're not allowed to do that. That's not okay. So if you do that again, there'll be no more roughhousing. So now the boy is learning to think of somebody besides himself. He's learning empathy. And we find that empathy is connected to roughhousing, where dads enforce the boundaries of saying, think of somebody besides yourself, or you'll lose the roughhousing that you want to think.
Empathy is connected to roughhousing. Yes. It sounds almost counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive. I mean, no one, and this is why dads don't say, oh, let me roughhouse, it'll teach the child to be empathetic. It doesn't pass. What the child is learning now is the difference between being assertive versus being aggressive. And so children that learn to think of others and to be assertive and not aggressive, and to have boundary enforcement, that is, they learn from that boundary enforcement postponed gratification. That is, I won't get what I want, roughhousing, until I postpone my gratification by thinking of my sister and brother and doing everything right. I don't really want to do everything right, but all right, I have to in order to get what I want, which is the roughhousing. The postponed gratification is the single biggest predictor of success. And so when a mom is really sensitive to the kid's needs and the gifts that a child has, and that's beautiful, and what the child's dream is, the child goes without, if the child doesn't have a dad, the child goes and tries to accomplish that dream, but often doesn't have enough postponed gratification, so it gets distracted by the next text that comes in, the next offer to play a new game, and so it doesn't accomplish what she or he wishes to accomplish. The result is they feel more ashamed of themselves. The teacher doesn't give them praise. The kids don't respect them as well. And when it comes to boy-girl time, Girls go out with winners, not losers. So the boy that can't succeed sees that he's not only not respected by his parents, his teachers, and his peers, he's also not, girls aren't interested in him. He turns to porn, becomes addicted to porn, and the more he becomes addicted to porn, the less girls are interested in him again, only proving to himself that he's worthless. And so that's when you start having the addiction to drugs, alcohol, pornography of many types, addiction to video games, and you have boys that just can't get their life together. They become obese. The obesity leads to other sexual problems. They're more likely to move back in with their home, to their parents' home at the age of 30, 35, and then again they feel ashamed of themselves.
And so now, for us, it's about the INFJs. We have to now remove ourselves from this victim mentality, get to the perspective, to the context, and then from there say, oh, okay, let me now navigate these waters with the knowledge, not the information, but with the knowledge. Being able to now apply this information. Okay? So now let's talk about chaos. As I said before, we're met now with a lot of men who are being told that, hey, you need to be more aggressive. You need to be more this. You need to be more that. I get it. Society. But why do we have that? Let's discuss, why was that? Who created this? How was this created? Let's discuss the evolution of, the man or the male figure having to represent this sort of character of strength, of what do you call it again? Of perseverance, of competition. Where does this come from? Clip number 2, go.
First of all, can you unpackage toxic masculinity?
Yes.
And maybe the society, is there possibly a societal obsession with this, and how does that impact the boy crisis?
Well, there is such a thing as toxic masculinity that came not from male privilege, but from male sacrifice.
Okay.
Throughout all of history, every generation had its war. And in every war, we trained our sons, in order to be a man, to be willing to be disposable in that war. And we learned to call them heroes if they sacrificed their life so the rest of us would live.
I wanted to make some remark about the war, because I think that my positive view of men definitely comes from the fact that my father and all of my uncles went to war. 5 uncles. My father was in the Pacific Theater as a paratrooper, and my uncles were in the Battle of the Bulge, wounded there, and all kinds of things. And I come from an Italian immigrant background where I saw no examples of male brutality. I saw men working all day long for their families. My culture regarded as scandalous to have for any man to abuse a woman. Okay, in the old country, a rapist, would end up dead and castrated, hung out to dry, okay, the next morning. And I've noticed too many of the leading feminists, okay, came from disordered family backgrounds where there was a negligent or abusive father. Okay, and I don't like the way their personal dramas, and from Gloria Steinem on down, the way they have projected their psychodrama onto all men everywhere. I think the evidence of history is overwhelming. Okay? How men have sacrificed their lives for women and children. So a tiny minority who have been abusive. Okay, that is the historical record, and it is terrible. Okay, that feminist rhetoric, okay, is injecting this animosity against men into young women. Okay, who are in this age of social media and a world of alternate reality. Okay, have accepted this horror story. Okay, of rape culture as the actual fact of the sexual landscape. I reject it completely.
These were toxicities, but they were toxicities that emanated from sacrifice.
Okay.
And what the feminists do not understand is that they say, men are toxic, that's because men are entitled and they have male privilege. Well, they did develop toxicities, But those toxicities came from exactly the opposite of male privilege. It was male sacrifice that also, by the way, led to women not having to go to war, not having to disconnect from themselves. Women got much more permission to be human beings. Men were trained to be human doings. Being a human doing is not being a full self. And so historically speaking, there's this enormous difference between heroic intelligence and health intelligence.
Right.
And so a lot of the qualities that men learn to be successful at work were often inversely related to what it takes to be successful in love.
Wow, that's
So now we understand where it comes from. Okay? Now, let's talk about females now.
You're right. I mean, females, historically speaking, have always had the option of having children as a sense of purpose. And today, of course, women have three possible senses of purpose: raising children, raising money, or doing some combination of both or some sequence.
okay.
I am really a product of first-wave feminism because I became interested in the 1960s before Betty Friedan even wrote her book about the feminine mystique. I became very interested in Amelia Earhart and Katharine Hepburn and all these women of the 1920s and 30s who were animated by the great acquisition of the vote for women in both Britain and the United States. Those women of that generation included Dorothy Parker, Dorothy Thompson, Anne Morrow Lindbergh, so many of them, did not denigrate men in calling for women's rights. They demanded simply equal opportunity for women to achieve at the same level as what men had done in each career. All right.
Okay? Females were once told they can't do this. They can't, wear this. They cannot achieve a certain level of education. They were being hidden, okay? While most folks would think that, hey, the women are being deprived, okay, beyond their will, okay? But as I would say, well, hold up. Women are just as capable as men. So why do you think that women were being sheltered and being, as it pertains to relationships throughout history? Why?
So I don't see a difference. I don't think women need more security and men are natural roamers. That's kind of really old cliche. I think that women, maybe, I could say, certainly if you understand female sexuality, get bored with monogamy much sooner than men. And that is something that is not often seen because we've always interpreted it as she's less interested in sex rather than she's less interested in the sex she can have. And she knows what turns her on and she knows what makes her feel secure. And she has always had to choose what makes her feel secure above what turns her on. But that's not the same as to say men, are naturally conquistadors and women are by nature domesticated creatures. And for that matter, if that was the case, she wouldn't have to be locked up so many times in so many parts of the world. If she's not going anywhere, why is she restrained everywhere?
Why do you think they were being chained up and locked up? Why do you hide the cookies in the cupboard? I mean, if everyone is equal, if everyone has integrity, why would you hide the cookies in the cupboard? If you're living with roommates, why would you label your milk? Hey, this is Tom's milk. Hey, doesn't matter. It doesn't, regardless of who it is, you didn't purchase that milk. It's not yours. So why would you even drink it? So why do we have to label it? Let's discuss cheating and integrity. Clip 3, go.
So it's good to observe people, and you can learn a few things. For example, you can learn that most people, given the chance, will cheat.
Right.
That's done Ariely.
Yeah.
Ariely conducted experiments. Most people, given the chance, will cheat. By the way, most people.
Yeah.
I mean, like 90%.
Yeah.
Given the chance, will cheat.
Yeah. You mean in a game or?
Yeah, they put them in a situation where they could cheat or not cheat.
Yes.
And then left the room. They cheated.
If it's monopoly.
Everyone cheated. Everyone cheated. Moral, not moral. Everyone cheated. So that's useful. Useful knowledge.
Yeah.
My grandmother, before she died, told me the same. So it might have saved a few taxpayers' dollars.
You see what I'm saying to you? So, where I'm going with this is that women are just as capable as men. So women would say, well, we're just as capable. We're just as equal. We have the same, we should have the same opportunities again. When we're going to make sure that you don't employ these opportunities to go out and have babies, and where this is, throughout history, this is way before technology allowed us to determine through DNA, who the child was who the child was for, and so forth and so on. So men had to now create these boundaries, okay? But it wasn't through just, I would say men. It was society had to create these boundaries. It was the culture, okay? So, but let's go back and discuss the history of and the evolution of marriage and relationships. We have to go back. It's not just let's talk about masculine versus femininity. We have to go way back. So let's go into the history of it.
Changed. By the way, monogamy had nothing to do with love forever. It was an imposition on women by men for patriarchy to know whose children you should feed and who gets the cows when you die. Or the goats, or the camels, whatever the culture. This is a very new definition of monogamy. That this means, you are so special to me that I will never need to look left or right anymore, because even if I think about someone else when I'm with you, it means that you're not everything. And this inflated sense of self, and then the loss thereof when there is a betrayal, has made infidelity no longer just painful, but traumatic.
Okay. So now let's talk about the evolution and the boundaries, how they're pushed.
Not too long ago, premarital sex would have been a total sin and a cross on you for the rest of your life. Then we brought premarital sex, normal, contraception, normal, gay marriage, now normal, sexuality, the homosexuality taken out of the DSM, in the 70s, finally normal, and the borders keep being pushed.
Okay. So now we have a situation by where we have masculine versus femininity. Masculine, feminine. Okay? We know that previously we had rules. Everyone knew what they were supposed to do. Just because of society, because of how things were. As I said, as you heard, relationships were binds, not because of love, not because of everything else that was introduced to it. It was because of contracts, because of longevity, of maintaining, family, what do you call it again? It was about building longevity within the family structure.
The interesting thing about Romania is that I was there the last time 10 years ago, and then before that in 79, in the heights of Ceausescu, and you could just kind of see what happens when urbanization occurs. People move to the city. They went from 8 children to 1.8 children in 20 years. They're doing in 20 years what the rest of Europe did in 100 years. And you see a kind of a cultural collapse of social forces. For the first time, the concept of happiness enters their life. Marriage used to be, basically, you choose, maybe you choose not well, bad luck, at least you can be lucky, you die sooner. It was gloom. It wasn't, love stories existed somewhere else, but marriage was not a place where you went to look for those aspects of yourself. The family mattered. And by the way, why I began this whole story was like, after the Clinton scandal, and because that is linked to the cultural thing, when the whole Lewinsky Clinton scandal occurred, it was very interesting to me. Why was America so comfortable with multiple divorces and so intransigent with transgression? The rest of the world has always opted the other way around, thanks to women. You preserve the family and you let the adult messes, you know, stay in their own little corner because there are too many people who depend on this marriage. The marriage isn't just between two individuals. And every time people would scream about affairs, I would say, why don't you scream about divorce? That the solution of all the family bonds with many longer consequences, except in Denmark, because the state takes care of you, you can divorce easily and then you have a 7-day model. But here, it was an interesting thing why this one has become so normative, and this one is like the biggest offense. And
So now we come to a point where women are now allowed, okay, based on society, evolved, not allowed, but women are able to have higher education. They are able to sit at the table. Homosexuals are able to be married. It's no longer considered a mental disorder.
And finally, let's consider something we all come across in our daily lives: homosexuality. Until 1973, and actually until 1980, homosexuality was defined as a mental health problem. In the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, edition 3, 1980, homosexuality was still listed as a mental health disorder. Homosexuals were considered sick people, in need of treatment, in need sometimes of medication, and in many cases in need of commitment to a mental asylum where they went through conversion therapy, a therapy which tried to convince homosexuals not to be attracted to the same sex, but to be attracted to the opposite sex. So, we are not talking about the Middle Ages. We are not talking about 300 years ago. We are not talking about Japan. We are talking about the West. We are talking about the United States of America. We are talking about the leading document of mental health, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And until 1980, a year after the AIDS epidemic started, homosexuality was considered a mental health problem. The knowledge of the psychiatric profession, psychological profession, did not change in 5 years. What changed was the attitude of society, the attitude of culture towards sadomasochistic sex. As our mores, as our values evolve, as our morality changes, as we become more tolerant, more accepting of unusual practices, as we realize that there is no such thing as normality, that there is a spectrum of disorders, we begin to understand that there is no such thing, for example, as sexual perversion. We used to think that there are only two sexes, male and female. Today we identify 7 sexes. And in census questionnaires in the United States, all 7 are going to be listed 2 years from now. So our thinking is evolving according to our culture and our society. In other words, what I'm saying is very worrying. What I'm saying is very frightening and very problematic, because what we consider to be clinical entities, what we consider to be psychological diagnosis, maybe we are wrong. Maybe many of the things we today consider to be mentally ill or mentally sick or mentally unhealthy, maybe in 100 years will be considered totally normal, totally healthy. We don't know. Experience shows that many things that used to be defined as mental illnesses are no longer defined as such.
So, we now have all of these boundaries pushed. We're now possibly moving into this direction.
Then we wanted a sexuality within marriage that was a sexuality that was connected, emotional, sexual, satisfying, luscious, with all of that. And now we're talking about a sexual freedom within marriage. And that is going to become the next conversation. Look, monogamy used to be one person for life. Today, monogamy is one person at a time. And everybody goes around saying, I'm monogamous in every relationship. There's no monogamy in your memories, and there's no monogamy in your fantasies. So the only place you have monogamy is in reality, and that's a rather small portion of your consciousness. And marriage used to be when you started to have sex for the first time, and now marriage is supposed to be the place where you stop having sex with others. And for some people, that's true, but the model has been proclaimed monogamy and clandestine adultery. That's what people have done forever. Now come the young generation, and they say, enough with the lying, let's have transparency, let's take this idea of self-fulfillment and freedom and self-actualization that we want in our life and in our relationships and apply it also to our sexual contracts, and let's begin to think about ways that we can preserve sexual freedom within a committed primary relationship, like many gay couples have done for a long time and from whom we have a lot to learn.
So now, again, we're talking about chaos now. So now we have transgender, we have homosexual, we have queer, we have lesbian, we have everything. And within all of these communities, we're sort of like separating ourselves from like society, right? We're keeping everyone in sort of some box. So now you have the trans, and then within the trans community, you have chaos, where you have a female, white female, who now becomes a white male. But then, because now she's become a white male, she's considered to have white privilege and can no longer participate in her college and her school functions and activities.
Listen to what the fuck I just said. She goes to a college. She applies to an all-girls college, a super liberal all-girls college. She decides that she is transgender and decides that she introduces herself as masculine of center genderqueer, changes her name to Timothy, decided that she's Timothy, and asks people to use the male pronoun when referring to him. Okay, so welcome on campus until the day that he announced, okay, it's he now, whatever, that he wanted to run for the school's office of Multicultural Affairs Coordinator, whose job is to promote a culture of diversity. What a perfect person to be a part of our campaign, encouraging people to be more open-minded and accept people.
That's so crazy.
No, they attacked her because now they felt that she is a white man, and they don't want a white man in that position, because if a white man is in that position, then they're supporting the patriarchy. So there was 3 other candidates for the gig, right? All women of color. Wonderful if one of them win. And then you got, okay, your problem solved. You got a woman of color in that position, plenty of diversity there. You're good, right? No, they all dropped out. And then they started an anonymous Facebook campaign encouraging people not to vote at all to keep a white man from winning the position. This is amazing.
So now, we've come to a point by where we're trying to figure out where we sit in society. The male, the boy, is told that he needs to, be more competitive, be less empathetic, be more of a provider for the family, right? As we discussed earlier. But then now when he comes to school, when he watches TV, he's told that he's too competitive. He's too toxic. He is too angry. He's too aggressive, right? He doesn't understand boundaries.
When boys go into school, they are being told that, about male privilege. They're being told that they're part of the patriarchy. They're being told that there's a book, if they're readers, they run across books with titles like The End of Men.
Okay.
Well, this is the first time in history where someone has grown up hearing that it's going to be the end of their gender, and hearing that their gender is associated with toxicity. There are so many parts of masculinity that we must not throw out like the baby with the bathwater. We must value the fact that almost all our inventions have been created by men, but not men just because they're males with physical bodies, but because men have been trained and selected for taking risks, trying things that are new. And in the process of taking risks and trying things that are new and failing, they're also more likely to, through those risks, to invent the iPhones that we're using, to invent most of the things that are part of our technology. And if we just keep putting men down and telling them that all masculinity is toxic, we're not going to be having men do those types of things. Men are told that if they succeed, it's because of their male privilege. If they don't succeed, it's because they're losers. If they're told in school when it gets to be boy-girl time or dating time, no matter what your dating choices are, they're told that if the boy knows when he's in 7th, 8th, 9th grade that his testosterone is strong enough to make him want to be sexual with more than half of the girls in his class. But if he were to act on his feelings, the response of the girls would be that he's acting too quickly and appropriately, and he might be considered a sexual harasser or a date rapist. On the other hand, the boys that are cautious constantly report to me that they're told that they're wimps, and that they notice that the girls are not going out with the boys who are cautious. They're going out with boys who are risk takers, and they're going out with the football players.
So it's kind of a no-win situation for the boys.
They feel so much in a no-win situation, and this is toxic.
So now this is chaos. Now, it's creating chaos for the man, for the female.
Here's what happened. As many viewers may or may not know, I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, and was for quite a while. I think it's fair to say the world's leading male feminist. We took that Marxist hierarchical framework and the civil rights hierarchical framework, and we misunderstood it. To not understand that, historically speaking, the world was not about patriarchy and privilege. The world was about the need to survive. And to survive, both mothers and fathers had obligations and responsibilities. Mothers risked their lives in childbirth, and dads risked their lives in war to protect the children that women bore. And so we had this, both sexes had roles that risked their lives, but both sexes had the same goals. And the goals was, I will do what I need to do to sacrifice myself in order to make my children's lives better than mine.
For most of human history, we were in the agrarian era when there was a natural division of labor and there was a world of women and a world of men, right? So we are still trying to sort out what's happened since the Industrial Revolution made it possible for women now to support themselves through jobs, to get jobs outside of the home, no longer to be dependent, wonderfully, on father, husband, brother, okay, for sustenance. Right. But the end result in the 20th century is this movement toward, from the manufacturing base, okay, to service sector jobs, now a job requiring much higher levels of education, therefore very long periods in the classroom of college and then postgraduate education. So what we've ended up with is a kind of system that favors women. Women like to work, on the whole. Most women, the overwhelming majority of women, like to work in a safe, clean, quiet, secure environment. Okay, that's why they're very good at office work. Right? With the decline of a manufacturing base, boys have less opportunity to define themselves as men. Okay, to master a craft the way in the agrarian period their fathers had. They learned to be a carpenter. They learned, to work with metals as their fathers had. Right? So there has been a real undermining of the natural basis of male identity in the acquisition of a skill.
She now evolves, going from being locked up in a closet, being shunned from society, to now having multiple master's degrees, owning businesses, being CEOs. But then now, is being told, well, if you're going to have a child, you will not be able to pursue your career, right? You won't be able to follow through as a man would, just based on the fact that you will now have to sacrifice a lot of, what you've created, based on the fact that you now have to provide for your children. So now it becomes chaos for them, because it's like, whoa, I used to be in a situation by where I nurtured. Now I'm out. Now I'm out there. I'm aggressively, searching, and finding myself, and I've created this career path for myself. But then now it's like, okay, well, now I need to have family. I feel that my biological clock is kicking in. But then now I'm told that I'm going to miss out on opportunities if I decide that I'm going to have children. And then now they start to so it's just chaos. Like, we've created chaos.
Is this simply because the roles have changed sufficiently, where women are playing much more of a male role? They're kind of playing both roles.
They're playing both roles, but they're not completely playing the male role, even as they're complaining about it. So, for example, girls in school are not being taught sex is good in many respects, and girls, if you want to choose, you have a responsibility to ask men out and pay for men, and to pick them up as often as they ask you out, pay for you and pick you up. So there's not really a fear of rejection. So why not have females share the risks of rejection when there really are few risks of rejection to begin with? But it's also a way of empowering our daughters to take risks, is to ask them to, if you're interested in a guy in class, don't resort to veto power, where you flirt with him and hope he asks you out, because veto power only gives you a yes-no option.
Okay.
What you need to resort is original choice power. When you're interested in a guy, you go up to him and make your choice, him, and you take. But that guy may not be interested in you. Now you're risking rejection, and so now you're being prepared to be a risk taker in life.
So we've had by where men haven't really had to change up until now, because now we're starting to see and have conversations about men, right? The whole MGTOW movement and all that stuff. Women have had to change. They've changed, but men haven't had to change in order to meet the changes that society has placed upon us.
What is your prescription for a step forward to try to solve this boy crisis?
Yeah, it's very hard to do it one step at a time, which is one of the reasons I've been sort of talking about creating a White House Council on Boys and Men, is because we really have to say boys' issues need to be part of our national agenda, just like we had 1,000 messages out there saying that girls' and women's issues had to be part of our national agenda. And the truth was that it was very important to expand the options that girls and women have. But now it's important to expand the options that boys and men have and get away from the toxic masculinity. If we started saying the things about black people that we say about men, that they're toxic, that they're all entitled and so on, we'd be called racist immediately. And so there's an enormous poisoning in the culture. The fundamental understanding that needs to be changed is the understanding that we are all in the same family boat. When only one sex wins, both sexes lose. And that is not happening. So the atmosphere has to change. And then part of that changing of atmospheres means we need to have more male teachers in schools. So there should be at least equal numbers of male teachers in elementary school as there is female teachers, so that children who are raised predominantly by moms in an inner city especially don't go from female-only homes to female-only school systems. And then we say to ourselves, I wonder why our son is looking for a drug dealer or a gang leader to get respect and have an authoritarian role model. Boys need structure. They need that structure to happen not from gang leaders, but from good male role models. We need to get more males involved in faith-based communities where they can talk to other males of their same age and see that those males have masks that they're wearing, and that a good faith-based leader can help the boy remove that mask and see that all the boys around him have vulnerabilities. We need to make sure that we have recess so that boys can have physical activity, because the Centers for Disease Control finds that every moment spent in recess does more good for studying for a test than every moment spent studying for that test. And so we need to have vocational education. Boys who have no sense of purpose, like we talked about before, don't become destructive. When testosterone is not channeled constructively, it is channeled destructively. And so vocational education needs to be as important in the United States as it is in Japan, where about 30% of children go to vocational education tracks. And then when they graduate from the vocational education programs, 99.6% of them get jobs. Here in the United States, when boys are not academically inclined, they often fail out of high school. When they fail out of high school, the unemployment rate in their 20s is more than 20%, 5 times what it is the national unemployment rate is on average.
Okay? And what has happened now is that we went from a movement of power to now a movement of victimhood. So now we sort of like circled back.
So you say you were initially aligned with the feminist movement, but then things really changed in a few ways you described. Tell me a little more about what changed and where things have ended up.
Yes, at the beginning, when I was involved with the feminist movement, the basic message was, I am woman, I am strong. And now it's much more likely to be, I am woman, I've been wronged. And when you start focusing on women and all the ways they've been wronged and all the ways they've been victims, you start getting victim power, and you begin to hone victimhood as a fine art. And that's what recent feminism has done. It's no longer an adult feminism. It's become an adolescent feminism. And this happens oftentimes with any bureaucracies or any movements. Things, you can have a union movement, which is extremely needed, and then the unions can become so strong that they oftentimes become a burden more than the other way around. So it's not just feminism that tends to do this, but the bureaucracy of feminism, the Violence Against Women Act, for example, that puts all of the focus on violence against women, when we have known since 1970s, when there's been more than 100 studies that have been done that show that and domestically, in a home situation, there's as much violence against men as there is against women. And even the females who are interviewed acknowledge that. And so, yet this is not part of the mental consciousness.
Right.
Feminism saying that men earn $1 for each 76 cents or 80 cents that women earn for the same work. Most feminists know, or most educated feminists know, that that's just plain not accurate. And yet this perpetuation of women as victim has become so accepted that presidential candidates like Kamala Harris will say that it's not even debatable that men earn $1 for the same work as women do, even though there is 25 differences between the reasons women earn less than men do, and that women can use all 25 of those differences to earn more than men should they wish to make those sacrifices, like in hazardous jobs or working longer hours or working at jobs that they don't like as much that pay more.
Which is very chaotic again. So it's just, we are just evolving in just chaos. So now let's talk about the sense of purpose. Okay? For a man, he's had to remove himself from his personal endeavors in order to now benefit the family. So basically, he impregnates his girlfriend or wife or spouse. Now he can no longer pursue certain career fields or activities because now he has to now go out and ascertain a certain level of income in order to provide for the family.
The men are the ones when they're married and have children that are expected to provide more of a higher percentage of the income than the women have. Now, when you provide a higher percentage of the income, this means you usually quit jobs that you love doing, which pay less as a rule, in order to do jobs that you don't like doing that pay more.
Yeah, for me, right after I came back with the mindset of like, I'm not doing no more 9-to-5s and I'm just going to start DJ and start producing music. And, reality kicked in. Again, I had a young child at the time, and I started having to get another 9-to-5 to start working. So I remember...
around 2006, me and my wife moved to Las Vegas. We just had our first daughter born. She was just 1 year old, and I wasn't really DJing out there. I wasn't DJing, period. I was doing random scratch shows here and there, but for the most part, I survived off these scratch records. I applied at random stores just to survive. I applied at like a grocery store. You know what I mean? I worked there for like 2 weeks. I worked at the UNLV bookstore for like a couple weeks, just like seasonal, just to make a little money to get through.
But the brief part of it is that it's not true that men earn more money than women do for the same work. What is true is that dads earn more money than moms. Because when men and women become moms and dads, men put much more time into the workplace, women put more time divided between the workplace and the home place. And so dads quit jobs that, like being a musician, an actor, or whatever, the love jobs, and they go into jobs that pay more. And that is what leads to that. The other part of that evidence is that when women and men are never married and never had children, women who have never been married and never have children earn 117% of what men who have never been married and never have children earn.
Oh, that's fascinating. And why?
Because usually women who have never been married and never have children focus on their careers and want to make sure that they're economically secure. Men who have never been married and never have children are usually men that one of the reasons they're not married is because they're not earning that much money, and then also they allow themselves to do jobs that they enjoy more. They allow themselves to continue being that musician, to continue being that teacher for a longer period of time because that's what they love to do.
You see what I'm saying to you? Whereas women now can now take this opportunity, and because of their ability to attain master's degrees, higher levels of degree, higher levels of career status, they now can actually make just as much or even more than men because they don't have to make any of these sacrifices if they choose not to. So I think it's very important that we have this discussion. But it's important that we take also this chaos into perspective, by which Billy Corgan says here.
We're getting normalized quite quickly to things we shouldn't be able to process that quickly.
To tragic shootings and everything.
Doesn't matter. Right? Human to human. I don't care who you are. I don't care whether you're on the complete other side of the world from me, politically, socially. I don't even need you to like what I do. If we can, as a people, move on as quickly as we're learning to move on, that's a spell. That's a spell. So, let me finish. But at some point, you're not going to be able to do that anymore.
You just said people put their head in the sand and they kind of want to put their head in the sand.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, so you're saying
no, I'm saying at some point, it's like when there's a social progression, right or wrong, it doesn't resolve like a chord at the end of a song until it gets what it wants. Or until it's smashed to pieces. Does it make sense to everybody what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay, So we've consciously or unconsciously, right or wrong, engaged a set of things in motion. Okay, now they're going to play out, right or wrong. And like a manager once said to me, as managers love all these kind of things they tell you, water finds its level. Water runs, So the point is whatever is the level of these movements, integration of new political and social ideologies, races, the changing face of America, the da-da-da-da-da, I don't care what it is, the changing face of art, the changing face of media. People are clicking off network television like never before, and now everything's on the iPad, and da-da-da-da-da, right? This is all hurtling forward at a speed and a rapidity with a rapacious kind of commercial nature that isn't taking into account the people that are going to get kicked to the side. And at some point, there has to be a resolution. That, as a musician, I know. That chord may not come until you and I are in the ground. But it's going to come. History shows that at some point, the war ends. People go home, people bury their dead, people grieve, people get what they want. But until that happens, it's chaos. And we're in it now. So when you say, what do you do? I would say the most valuable thing before you do anything is to achieve a sentient consciousness that allows you to process this information as real.
You see what I'm saying to you? And there's a whole lot more that I want to provide, and I will do so. But at the end of this video, because I won't do as much talking, but I just feel that we need to be careful. We need to be careful, especially for the INFJ male. And the reason why I say that is because it's an INFJ channel. I think we need to be careful in who we seek information from, and not to sort of rely on this victimization, this victim mentality, because that's what's happening now. We're coming to a point where now we're being made to feel like victims. Right, so we're being told we need to do this, we need to do this. Then now it's like, okay, well, you need to backpedal. But then now it's like, okay, well, as a result of our backpedaling, we cannot meet the needs of this. Even it's the same thing with the INFJ female. We're being told push forward. But then as a result of your push forwardness, you need to sort of like get back down in order to nurture, because you're being a little bit too demanding, you're a little too independent, you're not caring for your man. So now it just becomes this chaos, and now it becomes, we just now revert back to now victimhood. And I think society as a whole enjoys this, plays a big part in sort of controlling, these folks, everyone. So I think as INFJs, we need to sort of see everything for what it is and sort of push forward and say, you know what, let's just try to like remove ourselves from this noise and just go out there, take a little bit of everything, but become our own, right? Which is very difficult. But the thing is, you need perspective. You need the context, right? You cannot just go in there without having a total understanding of what is currently happening, right? So if I missed anything, I'll go ahead and present this information here.
There are three groups of boys that are dad deprived, and those dad deprived boys hurt. And when boys who hurt us. Here's what I mean by this. 93% of our prisoners are male, but of those 93% males, more than 90% of them are dad deprived males. So these boys hurt from dad deprivation, and then they commit crimes and they hurt us. Now let's look at a different population. mass shooters. Since Columbine, about 90% of the mass shooters are not just boys, but they're dad-deprived boys. Now let's look at ISIS recruits. More than 90% of the ISIS recruits are dad-deprived. Both the males and the much smaller percentage of females who are ISIS recruits are dad-deprived.
So there you have it, right? It's just, again, I'm just providing perspective, providing context, right? So that's pretty much it. Now you know the rest of the story.
So it's very easy to look at a painting of Otto Dietz from 1928 or 1932, and again, I hope I'm not wrong, but this is my memory, and go, gee, he was painting what was going to happen. And nobody was listening because they didn't want to listen.
Right.
Now you look and go, duh, there it is. You know, it's like...
Right. Well, it's like the creators of Homeland, the show on Showtime. I just read an article by the showrunner of that show, and he was flying to Europe to tape the season finale on the day of the Paris attacks, and and that had happened in one of the show. I mean, this had happened in the season of Homeland. They filmed
But
it
I'd argue
before.
something with you, right?
Do you think that...
I would argue that most people, at least the people that I know and that I see and experience, and I certainly experience a lot of people, are incapable of processing that kind of data in real time. So if they're incapable of processing it in real time, I don't think they're going to process it a week later.
Got it.
So if you're making contemporaneous art, chances are you're going to fly right by the ears of just about everybody that comes in contact with it because it won't seem relevant. Big Bang Theory is much more relevant to the cutesy, cuddly, onesie world they're living in than the world I'm living in. Now, a therapist or a psychologist or a mind like that might say that I'm living in a fun house of my own making, and that may be true. I tend to think I've got history on my side to say we're into something that tends to go south. Because you have an entrenched set of things going on.
Right.
It's not like volleyball, like, hey, what about this? Hey.
Yeah, your turn. Whoa, don't spike it. No, this is way more dangerous.
Yes. Yes.